In 2018, a 1967 Ford Mustang sold at the same auction house for $42,000. Same era, same word. Classic. Completely different realities. Most people hear classic car and picture the same thing. A vintage restoration in a weekend show, a garage hobby, something a retired engineer spends his Saturdays on. They're describing level 1. The gap between that and what sits at the top of this list isn't a difference in age or condition. It's a difference in what the object actually is. And at a certain level, a classic car stops being a vehicle and starts being the most important privately held artifact of the 20th century. 7 levels. Let's get into it. Level 1. The attainable classic. $15,000 to $60,000. This is where the hobby begins, and where most people first discover that classic car ownership is a completely different relationship with a machine than anything modern automotive culture prepares you for. A 1967 Ford Mustang, a 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle, a 1969 Triumph TR6, a 1975 Mercedes 280 SL. Vehicles built in an era before computerized everything, when a mechanically literate person could diagnose and fix most problems with hand tools in a driveway.
That repairability is the product, not the styling, not the history. The fact that the machine is legible. You can see what it does and why. Modern cars are appliances. A level 1 classic is a relationship. The honest take, level 1 is where enthusiasm meets reality fastest. A $35,000 Mustang becomes a $55,000 Mustang within 18 months if the owner didn't account for the restoration, the part sourcing, the specialist labor, and the specific category of weekend that disappears into a carburetor that won't cooperate. The people who thrive here are the ones who understood that the work was the point. The people who struggle thought the car was. Who is here? The 50-year-old who owned this exact model at 22. Sold it for rent money, and has been quietly planning to own it again ever since. The young enthusiast who bought deliberately at the attainable end because they wanted to learn the mechanical language before spending more. Both are correct approaches. Their garages smell the same. Level 2. The serious collector's classic. $60,000 to $250,000. Here, the purchase becomes a decision rather than an impulse, and the vehicle begins to carry documented history. A numbers-matching 1969 Camaro Z28, a fully restored 1957 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, a 1964 Aston Martin DB5 in verified original specification. Numbers matching means the engine, transmission, and major components carry the original factory stampings. They haven't been replaced, swapped, or rebuilt with non-original parts.
That matching is everything at level 2. A numbers-matching car and a non-matching car of identical appearance can differ in value by 40 to 60%. The difference is provenance. The car is what it says it is, verifiably, back to the day it left the factory. The honest take? Level 2 is where buying a classic car starts requiring the same due diligence as buying a piece of real estate. A pre-purchase inspection by a marquee specialist, a documentation audit, build sheet, window sticker, title history. The market at this level contains enough sophisticated sellers that an uninformed buyer pays a premium for a car that doesn't justify it. The research is not optional. It is the purchase. Who is here? The collector building a garage with a curatorial logic. 1 car per decade, 1 per manufacturer, 1 per category. The financial professional who recognized that certain correctly documented classics have outperformed the S&P 500 over 20 years and decided to own something that also happens to be beautiful. Level 3. The coach-built and pre-war classic. $250,000 to $1 million. This is where the car stops being a product and starts being an object, made by hand for a specific person who no longer exists. Before World War II, the automobile industry worked differently. A manufacturer produced a rolling chassis, engine, frame, drivetrain. The buyer then commissioned a coach builder, Pininfarina, Zagato, Touring, Fagoni at Falaschi, to design and construct the body. Every car was bespoke. Every body was unique. The same chassis could wear 20 different forms depending on who ordered it and what they asked for. A 1937 Bugatti Type 57, a 1938 Talbot Lago T150, a 1934 Packard 12. These are not old cars. They are individual works of art that happen to have engines. The craftsmen who built them trained for years learning to shape aluminum over wooden forms by hand, a skill that no longer exists in commercial practice anywhere on Earth. Honest take, at level 3, the car cannot be replicated. Not because the technology is secret, but because the knowledge, the time, and the specific human beings who possessed both are gone. What exists is what exists. Every example that survives a crash, a flood, or a fire reduces a finite number that was already small. That irreversibility is what the price reflects. Who is here? The serious collector who has spent a decade building the relationships, the knowledge, and the patience that this market requires. These cars are rarely advertised publicly. They move through specialist dealers, marquee clubs, and private introductions between people who have known each other for years. Level 4, the Racing Provenance Classic. $1 million to $8 million. One word changes everything at level 4. History. Not age, not condition, not rarity alone. Documented racing history. A specific car that started at Le Mans, that won at Monza, that was driven by a named driver in a named race, transforms a collectible into a primary historical document.
A 1955 Mercedes 300 SLR, a 1964 Ferrari 250 LM, a 1967 Ford GT40 with Gulf livery and Le Mans documentation. The GT40 that won Le Mans in 1968 and 1969 is not the same object as a GT40 of identical specification without that history. The races happened. The results are permanent. The car that crossed the finish line carries that permanence in its chassis number. The honest take? Racing provenance is the most verifiable form of value in the classic car market, and the most frequently fabricated. Race history is documented in period photographs, entry lists, timing sheets, and contemporary press coverage. A legitimate provenance research will locate every one of those sources. A car whose provenance cannot be verified to that standard is a car whose provenance should be questioned. The research required is extensive. The cost of skipping it is higher. Who is here? The collector for whom ownership is curatorial. They are not buying a car. They are acquiring stewardship of a documented moment in motorsport history. The obligation that comes with that, correct preservation, accurate representation, responsible future sale, is understood as part of the purchase. Level 5, the verified icon. $5 million to $20 million. Here, the car has a name. Not a model name, a name. A specific identity that the automotive world has already assigned before you acquire it. The barn-find Ferrari 250 GT California Spider that appeared in a French estate. The Porsche 917 that Steve McQueen drove in Le Mans. The Jaguar E-Type Series 1 Roadster that Enzo Ferrari called the most beautiful car ever made. A specific example, a specific color, a documented owner history that includes someone the world already knows.
At level 5, the car exists in the public record before you own it. Auction house specialists have written about it. Automotive historians have documented it. The provenance is not something you need to establish. It was established decades ago by people whose professional credibility rests on its accuracy. Honest take, this is the level where the car enters the same conversation as major art. A verified icon appreciates not on a collector car index, but on the logic of cultural artifacts. Scarcity plus significance plus condition plus documented identity. When all four align, the market behaves the way it behaves for a Basquiat or a Rothko. The next buyer is not a car enthusiast. They are an institution. Who is here? The ultra-high net worth collector, whose holdings already include significant art, wine, and watches, and who recognize that the classic car market at this level operates by the same logic with less efficient pricing, which means opportunity. And the enthusiast who built toward this level over 30 years and acquired one car at level 5 as the centerpiece of everything else. Level 6, the private treaty masterpiece, $20 million to $50 million. Here, the auction house disappears.
A private treaty sale means the car never appears in a public catalog. No estimate published, no hammer price reported. A specialist intermediary, R.M. Sotheby's private sales division, Gooding & Company, a mark-specific dealer with the right relationships, facilitates a transaction between a seller who requires discretion and a buyer whose interest was communicated privately before any formal process began. The 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, the 1954 Mercedes W196 Grand Prix car, the 1929 Bentley Blower. These are not cars that appear on the open market, because the open market is not the right mechanism for objects of this significance. The buyer at this level is already known to the seller, or known to someone the seller trusts. The negotiation happens in a context where both parties understand the object's place in automotive history and price it accordingly. Honest take? At level 6, the car is a cultural artifact that happens to be privately owned. Museums want it, Concours d'Elegance committees build exhibitions around it, automotive historians cite it in academic work. The owner is custodian of something the broader culture has a stake in, whether or not the culture has any legal claim on it. Some owners respond to that with access and exhibition. Others respond with a locked garage and a very short list of people who know where it is. Who is here? The individual whose net worth makes this purchase a considered allocation rather than a defining one. The family whose collection has been built across 2 generations with the specific intention of holding objects that appreciate on a century-long timeline. The sovereign wealth vehicle that treats trophy assets as a separate allocation class.
Level 7, the final level. Forget the car. At level 7, the vehicle is not a collectible. It is not an investment. It is not a piece of motorsport history or a coach-built masterpiece or a verified icon. It is the object that made the automobile meaningful. The 1936 Mercedes-Benz W125, the 1954 Mercedes W196 that Juan Manuel Fangio drove to the World Championship, the 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, 13 examples, the most valuable production car ever built. A machine so significant that Ferrari launched a legal battle to control who could own them. But above all of these sits one category, the cars that were never supposed to survive. The Bugatti Type 41 Royale, 6 built for European royalty, only 4 sold. One owner refused to sell his at any price until his death. These were built for a world that ceased to exist, the pre-war aristocratic order that commissioned bespoke motor cars the way previous centuries commissioned portraits. The Royale was not designed for a market. It was designed for kings. And when the kings ran out of money and the war erased the world they inhabited, the Royales became artifacts of a civilization that no longer existed.
At level 7, the car is not rare because production was limited. It is rare because the world that produced it is gone. The engineers are gone. The craftsmen are gone. The clients are gone. The economic and social structure that made the object possible, gone. What remains is the object itself, sitting in a climate-controlled room, owned by someone whose name is not attached to any public record of the transaction, maintained by a specialist whose entire professional practice exists to keep one category of irreplaceable thing alive. At level 7, you are not owning a car. You are holding the last evidence that a certain kind of human ambition existed at all. The man spending his Saturday on a carburetor that won't cooperate and the institution holding a Bugatti Royale in a climate-controlled room are doing the same thing. They found a machine built by people who believed that how something moved through the world, not just that it moved, was worth caring about. The difference is which belief they could afford to preserve. A classic car was never the point. What it proved about what human beings decided to make beautiful when they didn't have to was. If this was useful, subscribe. Every week I break down how the world actually works, not how the brochure describes it.